Okay, so it looks like I am live now. If whoever is tuning in will bear with me just one moment, I just want to double check that there is actually audio playing. Then I will begin. Right. Ah, excellent. Audio is working. I just. Oh, bugger. Oh, no, I haven't. I haven't. Okay. Panic over. I thought I'd close down the stream. So, the whole purpose of me doing this is to hopefully improve my out loud reading. Um, because I don't really read out loud very well. So, I'm hoping that through doing this, I can improve. Well, yeah. So, Peter James, Left You Dead. Chapter 1. Sunday the 1st of September. Most Sundays, at some point, they bickered over something. Mostly nothing important, and mostly it blew over quickly when they just looked at each other and laughed it off. And this Sunday afternoon, coming up to their 4th wedding anniversary in just a few weeks' time, was no exception. Today's bickering had been about cat litter. Niles driving scared Eden at the best of times, although he'd only had one accident. A few years ago, he was driving them home from a date and he had rolled their car. He'd been showing off, stupidly, he confessed. They'd just brought a new, well, second-hand Golf GTI, and he was demonstrating how quickly it was when, in the murmured words of one of the traffic cops to colleagues attending the scene, he'd run out of talent. Today, they'd been arguing for the past half an hour as they headed home, and, as ever, when Niall was annoyed, he drove their BMW faster than normal. They'd already had one near miss as he passed a car towing a caravan, pulling in just feet in front of the oncoming Land Rover. In front of the oncoming Land Rover. Great, Eden thought. I'm going to die, and any minute my last words on earth will have been cat litter. Look, do we really need to get it now, darling? Niall said, calming a little. I want to try and I want to try and catch the end of the Grand Prix. You can watch it on catch up. Not the same. He wound down his window and chucked a tied up piece of gum out of it, fished in his pocket, and chewed on a fresh tap. I wish you wouldn't do that. Wrap it up and put it in the bin, she tuttered. We we do need to get it now. You were going to pick it up on Friday, and you forgot, she reminded him. And you were going to pick it up yesterday, and you forgot again. I know, but I was busy trying to earn money. 3 airport runs and one stingy tip. You should think about working for Uber. You you can rate your passengers, give them 1 star if they don't tip. The day I work for Uber, he replied, will be the day I own it. She let that go. Now had his big dreams, not wanting their row to flare up again. It would take just 5 minutes to dash in and get it. He grunted. She leaned forward and picked up his iPhone. Just going to look at the photos you took today? Can't believe you let your phone back. Let me try that again. She leaned forward and picked up his iPhone. Leaned forward and picked his iPhone up. Just going to look at the photos you took today, Can't believe you let your battery run so low. It has a much better camera. I would have charged it up in the car if you'd remembered to get the new cable that actually works. I've turned it off to conserve what's left, she said, flicking through the maze of apps. You should have charged it last night. She shook her head. Well, I didn't, he grunted again. Christ, she said, continuing to look through the apps. How many apps do you have on here? You must have over 100. I bet you don't even remember what half of them are. You said you were going to get rid of the ones you'd never use. I will, when I have time. She shook her head, grinning. If it makes you happy to have them, he grinned back. Actually, it makes me happy. That's terrible. She found a folder labelled photography, which contained the camera and albums, and tapped on the photos. There were several, taken earlier this afternoon, of the beautiful exterior of the grand Elizabethan mansion and its magnificently kept grounds, looking their best in the late summer sun. The lake, the views across the South Downs, then several of her, in tight white shorts and a pink top, leaning against a wooden railed fence, with the lake behind. Wow, you've taken some great ones of me, she said. Love them? Well, some of them. They'd have been better on your phone. Surreptitiously, she deleted the ones she liked the least, leaving just one that she was really happy with, the one of her standing with the lake in the background. Then she went back to going through the apps. What's this one? Mind Node. No idea. Shall I delete it for you? Go ahead, he said with faint irritation in his voice. She continued through, deleting a couple more after questioning him on them. As they entered the 40-mile-per-hour limit on the upper Southern Road, As they entered the 40-mile-per-hour limit on the upper Shoreham Road, he pointed through the windscreen at the thickening clouds. Rain's forecast in 2 hours. I've got to do a Heathrow pickup tonight, and I really want to do a bike ride after the Grand Prix. Getting some cardio before I have to go. Can it wait until tomorrow? The cat won't know it's... Sorry. The cat won't know to cross its legs, darling, she said. Just pull up outside. I can run into the store, grab some, and be straight out again. I'll be 5 minutes. Promise? I know what you're like when you get into a store. You just start buying everything else you think you need. She grinned at him and touched his leg suggestively. You're all I need. Yeah. She leaned over and kissed him on the cheek, and immediately saw that strange, unsettling look in his eyes. So different to when they had first got together, when she saw only deep love. I promise, she said. Now's mother was Spanish. He had a shock of dark brown curls and a face that had reminded her, the first time she saw him, of a younger version of the actor Dominic West. When he smiled, he was the handsomest. Sorry. When he smiled, he was the handsomest man on earth. When he was angry, he looked almost Neanderthal. Their regular sunny pastime was visiting the National Trust properties whenever possible, which were free on their membership. Wow. Try that again. 1 moment. Their regular Sunday pastime was visiting National Trust properties whenever possible, which were which were free on their membership cards. But this afternoon they'd been to Parham House, owned by a different trust, wandering around its glorious deer park. Now drove into the car park of the huge Tesco superstore, 3 miles to the west of their home in Brighton, and was immediately I'll have to get some water in a moment, and was immediately annoyed by the queue of cars in front of them. Look at this. Shit, baby. It's gonna take ages. Just stop the car, I'll jump out and run in while you park. Then I'll come and find you. The stuff's heavy. Are you sure? She gave him a sideways look. When did you actually get any? Um, I don't remember. So how do you think it appears in the house? By magic? Does the tooth fairy bring it? Okay, okay, muscle woman. Look, I'll pull in over there. He swung into an empty bay some distance from the store. Grabbing her handbag, Eden jumped out, blew him a kiss, slammed the door, and hurried off through the maze of vehicles. Now turned up the volume on the radio and listened to Laura Poblano singing Life Goes On. And it was followed by another song. He was tempted to light a cigarette, but Eden didn't like him smoking in the car. She didn't actually like him smoking at all. So he just sat, listening to the music, looking anxiously at his watch, then at the car clock. Van Morrison's Brown-Eyed Girl, then another song. Johnny Cash, You Are My Sunshine. They both loved country and western. Maybe she'd be back before the song ended. This was one of her favourites. But she wasn't. Another song played. Then another. 20 minutes had passed, he realised. What's going on? He wondered. She's probably shopping for more stuff, despite her promise. The sky was darkening further. His chances of catching the final stages of the Grand Prix were fading. He had recorded it and could watch it later or tomorrow, but that really wasn't the same. Now his concern was getting home before it started raining and to head out on his bike. He looked at the car clock, then his watch, yet again. Another song. 25 minutes. Then half an hour. What the hell are you doing in there? In a flash of temper, he punched the steering wheel boss and winced in pain. He would give it another 5 minutes, he decided. How long does it take to grab a bag of cat litter? It was coming up to 3:50 p.m. Finally, losing his patience, he decided to go and find her. With that, bear with me just 2 moments. I need to grab some water. Okay. Chapter 2, Sunday, the 1st of September. A tall, ginger-haired employee with a badge that read Tim blocked his path. I'm afraid we're closing in 10 minutes, sir, he said courteously. I'm just going to help my wife with a bag of cat litter, Nell said. Oh, of course, sir. That's fine, sir, he said, stepping aside. The cat litter's down aisle 2. Now entered the vast interior, which was thinning out. There were lines of customers at each till, and more at the self-checkout area to his right, but Eden wasn't among them. He saw another member of staff, a woman with long brown hair. Excuse me, Where do I find aisle 2? He asked. She offered to take him, but he asked her to just direct him. He hurried down an aisle of dairy products, with books and DVDs to his right, towards the rear of the store, barging past a woman with a small child who shouted something at him. Waving an apology, he turned right at the deli counter, as directed. He made his way past several aisles, glancing down each one, and finally came to the one marked Pet and Animal Supplies. It was empty, like all others. He strode down it to the vast diminishing queues at the checkout tills. No sign of Eden. What on earth was she doing? Increasingly irked now, he strode up and down the deserted aisles of the store. Stopping in front of the cereals, he pulled out his phone and called her. The phone. This number is currently unavailable. Please try again later. Turn your bloody phone on! A big tubby guy swaggered towards him, radio clipped to his chest, a bunch of keys hanging from his belt, like a goalier's. An amiable but no nonsense face. I'm sorry, sir. We're closed. I'm sorry, sir. We're closed now. If I could ask you to make for the exit. I'm trying to find my wife, Now replied. She came in over half an hour ago and I can't find her anywhere. She's not at the checkout. He shook his head. Want me to put in a request on the tannoy? If you wouldn't mind. Maybe someone could check the toilets in case she's sick or something. Your wife's name is, sir? Eden. Eden Paternoster. Eden. As in Gordon of. Now nodded. The guard spoke into his radio. Moments later, now heard through the tannoy, would Miss Eden Pater... Sorry. Would Miss... I'm going to try that again. Would Miss Eden Paster Noster please come to the customer service desk at the front of the store, where her husband is waiting? Now didn't bother asking him to correct the announcement. The guard indicated for him to follow. I'll have someone check out the toilets, sir. Can you give me a description of the lady? She's 31, 5'7", shoulder-length brown hair, wearing a pink-coloured top and white shorts. Deadpan. The guard led Niall to the front of the store, stopped near an employee who was stacking tins of beans on a shelf and spoke into his radio. Then they walked on, bypassing the checkout counters and the newsstand, and stopped at the customer service desk over to the right of them. There was a small blue and white podium a short distance away with two large computer monitors. Both showed empty aisles. We'll take a look at the old store, sir, the guard said. He worked a toggle on a control panel to the side of the desk. Aisle after aisle appeared, with just a few members of staff who were restocking shelves. No Eden. The last customers were now going through the checkout desks. Now could see the self-checkout tills were empty. The security guard's radio crackled. He listened briefly, then turned to Niall. There's no one in the toilets, sir. Are you sure she came into this store? Yes, absolutely. The guard asked an employee of the customer service desk to put out a code 6 call. Moments later, her voice rang through the tannoy. This is a colleague announcement for all managers. Code 6 in progress. Several employees materialized over the next couple of minutes. 7 now counted. The guard spoke to them. This gentleman's wife is missing. Age 31, shoulder-length brown hair. She's wearing a pink top and white shorts. Name of Miss Eden Paster Noster. Please do a sweep of the aisles. Paternoster. Eden corrected him this time. Apologies. Miss Eden Paternoster. the guard told them. As they all hurried off, the guard turned to Nell. She couldn't have left the store. she couldn't have left the store. Well, she knew where I was parked. She didn't go to Marks and Spencer's, maybe, or McDonald's. Not unless either of them sell cat litter. Again, no smile. She didn't leave just as you came in, and you missed her, sir. Nell shrugged. That was possible. Maybe he was making a huge fuss over nothing. He took his phone out of his pocket, checked, just in case there was a text or WhatsApp message from Eden, then dialed her again. And again, it was unavailable. They both shut at 4 too, that last. M&S, yes, not McDonald's. 5 minutes later, all employees were doing the sweep of the store had returned. Eden wasn't on the premises. Now thanked them and had a sudden feeling he was being a total idiot. What if the guard was right and he had missed her somehow? Eden coming out as he'd gone in. He walked swiftly back through the emptying car park towards the dusty black BMW convertible. Even though he'd put the roof up and was sure he'd locked it, he peered through the window when he reached it. She wasn't in the car. Chapter 3. Sunday, the 1st of September. Roy Grace pulled his Alfa Romeo coupe into the largely empty car park across the rural road from Ford Prison in West Sussex, shortly after 4 p.m. The detective superintendent was dressed in his weekend casual jeans, t-shirt, and a light jacket. He'd deliberately chosen to come at the weekend to make this a private visit, and had pulled a favour from the governor, whom he was friendly with, to ensure this wasn't recorded as official business. Grace suspected that sorry. Grace suspected there he was going to be wow, I really cannot get over this little bit. Grace suspected there he was going to be a very good reason why he wouldn't want his boss, Assistant Chief Constable Cassian Pugh, to know about this visit and quiz him on on his purpose, as he surely would have done if it had been during work time. Police officers rarely felt comfortable doing prison visits, knowing that if they were unlucky enough to be there when a riot happened to kick off, they'd be the first target for the inmates. It didn't matter how you dressed. You could be as casual as you liked. Your job was ingrained in your skin, as potently as cheap aftershave. Most cons could smell you a mile away. Copper, scum, pigs, filth. He'd come out of curiosity, after receiving a handwritten letter a while ago from his disgraced former colleague, Detective Sergeant Guy Batchelor. Roy, I hope this finds you well. Not much to report here, other than waiting for the appeal hearing against the length of my sentence. Other prisoners haven't been as nasty to me as I feared. So far, anyway. I'm writing because I may have something of interest about our mutual friend. No names mentioned because all these letters are read, but I know you were interested in doing something with that church bench. I may be able to help you. Perhaps you could come over. I can promise you it won't be a wasted journey. All my best to you and the team. Hey, I miss you all. Guy. The letter contained a cryptic clue which his wife, Cleo, had solved for him. Church bench equaled pew, she suggested brilliantly. For almost for almost 2 years, Assistant Chief Constable Cassian Pugh, his direct boss, had been the bane of his life, to the point where Grace had been seriously considering leaving Sussex Police and taking up a commander role he'd been offered in London's Metropolitan Police, just to get away from the vile, odious man. He opened the driver's door with some misgivings and stepped out into the vast, empty space and silence beneath a beneath a mackerel sky which seemed to share these same misgivings, and which, from his limited experience of sailing, he knew heralded rain in a few hours. But it was still a warm afternoon. As he walked through the car park and then crossed the road towards the compound of the single-story buildings, he thought that if it wasn't for the high mesh fencing, the place could have been mistaken for a holiday camp. Men's prisons in Britain were categorized from A to D. Cat A were high security, housing violent and dangerous convicts such as serial killers and terrorists who posed the greatest threat to the public, police, or national security. Cat B were also high security, but for those who were deemed less of a threat, as well as for those prisoners in the local area and those who were being held long term. Cat C were training and resettlement prisoners, enabling prisoners to develop skills to use on their release. Cat D, like this one, were open prisons, for those regarded to be a minimal risk, mostly white-collar criminals, but also for inmates from higher category prisons who were nearing the end of their sentences and were considered safe and suitable to soon re-enter the community. All the same, he slipped his warrant card under the glass shield of the security desk with the same unease he always felt arriving at any prison. He waited while the serious-looking woman on the other side, who was neither pleasant nor unpleasant, studied his identity before shoving the small grey tray containing his warrant card back at him. Please put your phone and any valuables in one of the lockers behind you, Detective Superintendent. She gave him only the very faintest nod of acknowledgement, and they were both on the same side here. Roy complied, immediately feeling naked as he parted with his ID and phone, his lifeline to the outside world. Set the combination and stepped through the electric door, which immediately closed behind him like an airlock. Tabloid newspapers regularly ran shouty headlines about how cushy life inside British prisons was. But he bet none of their editors had ever sampled even just one night at Her Majesty's pleasure. He hadn't either, but he talked to plenty of people who had, and no one, ever, had told him it had been a party. In many prisons, such as Sussex's Category B HMP Lewes, on on some wings the inmates were forced to share a cell with 2 bunks and a toilet, with no seat behind a plastic shower curtain, just 3 feet from the face of the unfortunate on the lower bunk, and had to try and sleep on pillows harder than breeze blocks. At least here, in Ford, he knew each prisoner had his own decent, if cramped, cell. After a couple of minutes, a second door opened and an officer, with keys hanging from his belt, greeted him with a friendly smile and an outstretched hand. Detective Superintendent Grace. I don't know if you remember me from Lewes Prison a couple of years ago. Roy Grace, who had a near photographic memory for names and faces, looked at him. Short grey hair and rounded shoulders. Andrew Kempston? Well, I am impressed. Roy shrugged. Very good. Very good to see you again, sir. The governor thought it best you came after general visiting hours were over, and he's arranged for you to meet former Detective Sergeant Batchelor in a private interview room, cameras off. And the governor knows you are going to be handed some evidence. Unlike some prison officers, Kempston at least seemed Kempston at least seemed refreshingly respectful to his charges. Sorry, I think that's a line I meant to read. Unlike some. No, I'm right. Oh, God, I'm stumbling over my words. Right, hold on. Do that again. Unlike some prison officers, Kempston at least seemed refreshingly respectful to his charges. Roy Grace followed him across a wide open courtyard, past a row of prefab single-story buildings. Several men were mooching around, some stooped with that air of total defeat he'd observed on previous prison visits, others looking more determined and purposeful. One with a rake and bin bag looked like he was actually happy to be doing something useful. They entered a large room that was like a impoverished, redundant public library. Several prisoners were seated at bare tables, either reading newspapers or books, in front of a rack of shelves containing mostly exclusively crime novels. Among them, he noticed several of the Martina Cole, Kimberly Chambers, and Ian Rankin. Following Kempston, Roy was ushered by the officer into a room at the far end. He was greeted by the sheepish smile of his former colleague and, until recently, one of the most capable detectives on his team. Guy Batchelor, with his burly physique, rose from a chair. Some while ago, the detective sergeant had totally lost the plot when a woman he'd been having an affair with, and to whom he had apparently had made all kinds of promises about a future together, had trapped him in a web of lies. It had resulted, if Basher was telling the truth, in a furious row, in which, through an escalating chain of events, she'd ended up dead in a bathtub. And he'd panicked. In the ensuing downward spiral, the DS had attempted to commit suicide, and Roy had risked his own life trying to stop it. Throughout his life and career, Grace had always been prepared to see the best in people. He believed, with some exceptions, that most human beings were fundamentally decent, and that it was stuff beyond their control, whether abusive parents in their childhood or something that happened later in their lives that skewed them onto the wrong path. So when Guy had made contact saying he wanted to see him because he had something that might be valuable to him, Roy had, because he was something. Try again. Roy had decided he would see him, both because he was intrigued by what Guy might have to say, but also just to talk to him. And because maybe, in some small way, he could help this man who had ruined his own life and the lives of others in a period of madness. All the same, he was here with some reservations. It was just like any other interview room. A metal table, hard chairs, wide-angle CCTV camera up near the ceiling, a red notebook sitting on the table. "I'll be outside," Andrew Kempston said. "I'll be back in an hour, but shout if you need me." "I doubt that'll be necessary," Grace said. Kempston gave him a You never know, shrug, and shut the door, more softly than other officers might have. Chapter 4. Sunday, the 1st of September. Roy Grace shook Batchelor's hand, trying to mask his surprise at his appearance. The former DS had aged a decade since they'd last seen him in court, and one of the things that was different about him was he no longer reeked of cigarette smoke. So, how are you, Guy? Grace felt so many conflicting emotions actually seeing him. Batchelor had once been a family man and highly respected detective. Grace knew that for the rest of Guy's life, the knowledge of what had happened and the guilt would haunt his dreams and his every waking thought. It would never leave him, and what future lay ahead for him once he walked out of the prison gates, he couldn't even to begin to guess at. Yeah, alright actually. A lot better since I was moved here. Lewes was a real shithole. 5 days confined to my room because there weren't enough officers. No shower or change of clothes. It's okay here. I can cope. Grace nodded. He'd always hated corrupt police officers and was intrigued to know more as to why Guy Batchelor had become corrupt himself. He was now paying a terrible price. Life gave you second chances for most screw-ups you made, but killing a fellow human being was crossing the Rubicon. Then an old saying he had once read came to his mind. Before you judge a man, walk a mile in his shoes. Putting up a chair opposite Guy, he sat down. Honestly, boss, I'm gobsmacked you actually came. Grace shrugged. Guy, Guy, I'm not condoning anything you've done by this visit. But I do know shit can happen to any of us, at any time. Who was it who said that we're all just one paycheck away from being homeless? Anyway, it took a while to organise, but I'm here now. It was good to see Guy smile, he thought, and that smile momentarily dropped the decade from his face. Batchelor raised his arms expansively. Sorry I can't offer you a drink, boss. Sort of got limited facilities here. It was Grace's turn to smile. Then, serious, he said, So, tell me. Good cryptic clue, by the way. Figured you'd get it. Actually, Cleo did. Batchelor tilted his head and said wryly, Not losing your touch, are you? Want to end up in a cat C? Sorry, I'll try again. Want to end up in a cat A prison? Or do you want to tell me about my good friend, Mr. Churchbench? Grace said with mock severity. I'll go for the second option. Thought you might. Okay. When I was in Lewes prison, in a tastefully furnished double room with ensuite bog, last redecorated circa 1890, I had a cellmate who, like myself, had never been inside before. He was a very charming Indian man, a stockbroker with a small London city firm. As you can imagine, we had many hours, especially because of staff shortages, in which we were locked in the cell with nothing to do except read, watch television, or chinwag. Grace nodded. He liked to talk. When I went in, I I tried to keep it quiet that I'd been in the police, obviously. but it was common knowledge before I'd even arrived. My cell buddy, I won't give you his full name, let's just call him Raj. Raj told me he'd become friendly w- with a certain senior copper at the Met a few years back. At the time, this officer had been in the serious. Sorry, try again. At the time, this officer had been with the Serious Fraud Office, and they were investigating a wealthy client of Raj's firm who had alleged links with organized crime. Anyhow, those links turned out to be unprovable, and the investigation was dropped. But in the interim, Raj had struck up a friendship with the Met detective, whose name I might so try again. Whose name I might possibly know. No, I'm gonna try that again because it's Grace saying that, and yeah, bear with me. Anyhow, whose links turned out to be un- unprovable, and the investigation was dropped. But in the interim, Raj has struck up a friendship with the Met detective, whose name I might possibly know. Quite possibly. Guy gave a thin smile. Raj slipped a few insider trading tips to said officer, enabling him to amass considerable personal wealth, quite illegally. Raj's firm, a relative minnow by city standards, had outperformed the stock market for their clients for several years, though this insider through this insider trading practice. Then the crunch came, Roy suggested. Exactly. Raj's company had hit the financial regulator's radar. Raj's buddy in the Met made a phone call to tell him to get his house in order. PDQ. It was a deliberate breach of the Data Protection Act, providing information that should not have been disclosed. He may well have also perverted the course of justice. And Grace quizzed. As a result of this call, Raj was able to take preventative action to reduce the evidence that would be recovered by the Met when they raided his home and business premises. That tip off, Raj told me, probably halved his prison sentence. He's expecting a future visit from the Met Financial Crimes team to find out what more he can say about his former clients. He wants to use his information as a bargaining chip to try to get moved from Lewes to an open prison in the Birmingham area to be closer to his family. So, do you want to confirm this Met detective's name? Grace said. Guy Batchelor grinned again. It's as you, it's as you, sorry, it's as you deduced, Sherlock, or rather, Cleo did. Her maiden name, her maiden name's not Watson by any chance? He opened up the notebook on the table and began to read, stumbling at times as he tried to decipher his own handwriting, a problem where Grace had often encountered himself as a junior officer, taking statements in the days before they had become mostly electronic. When Batchelor had finished, Roy had to restrain himself from punching the air with exultation. Stockbrokers routinely recorded all phone conversations with clients as proof of any instructions should the client dispute one. Guy Batchelor had just read out the details of a digital recording of Cassian Pugh, pleading with Raj to wipe all records of him making stock purchases and sales over the previous 3 years before the investigation. Apparently, Raj left the evidence with a family member before being imprisoned. If the real recording was anything too close was anything close to what Raj had apparently recited to Guy, this was dynamite. Roy Grace said nothing for a short while, thinking it through. Then he said, "There's one thing I don't understand, Guy. Which is why you're telling me this." Bachelor shrugged. "Two reasons, boss. One's personal, other isn't. Personal first. I sent a request to ACC Pew asking if he would appear as a character witness at my trial, and he never responded. I sent the request 3 times." He shrugged again. "Second reason is I know how much he fucked you around. You always stood by me. And I remember your words in court. Despite all I'd put you through, I didn't deserve it, but I'll respect you forever for it. Can you do me a favor, Guy? Keep this information confidential for the moment. I'd like to take it directly to Alison Vosper. She's now Deputy Assistant Commissioner in the Met. At the time Pugh appears to have committed these crimes, he was a serving Metropolitan Police officer. Will you do that?" "Of course. I really appreciate you coming forward with this information. Whatever your reasons for doing so." Grace sat for a moment, thinking. "So, if I need what you have in that notebook, can I use it?" "You can expect a visit from the Met's anti-corruption team, and probably sooner rather than later." Bachelor shoved it across the table towards him. "It's yours. Take it. I kind of feel I owe you one." Roy Grace had been asked a number of times over the years if he had ever felt his life had been on the line during his work as a police officer, and his answer was yes, on several occasions, but the most recent of which had been, despite his fear of heights, scaling the vertical interior ladder of Brighton's 531-foot-high I-360 tower in an attempt to stop a panicked Guy Bachelor from jumping off the top. What had been far worse than climbing up it when he'd been fueled by adrenaline was having to climb back down, knowing that if his grip slipped just for one moment, he would have plunged to certain death. "You could say that," he replied. Then he held up the notebook. "Consider the debt paid, with interest." Chapter 5. Sunday, the 1st of September. Back in the prison car park, Roy Grace sat in his Alfa, window cracked to let in some breeze. He opened a red notebook. His hands were shaking as he began to read Bachelor's notes, or rather, began the slow work of deciphering them. Half an hour had passed. He realized with a start by the time he had finished, and his hands were now shaking even more. Shit. If this was true, he would have ACC Cassian Pugh banged to rights. He stared at the car and headed back. He started the car and headed back towards home, his mind in turmoil. He felt conflicted. What if what Guy had given him was genuine, and he little doubted it was? And if Raj, whoever he was, would hand over the recording of Pugh and testify, and he had good motive for doing so, then Cassian Pugh's career was toast, and he might well face a prison sentence. But Grace wasn't smiling as he drove. Sorry, hold on. There we go. But Grace wasn't smiling as he drove. Sure, Pugh was a pain in the arse, but it churned over in his mind for some minutes the morality of destroying a fellow officer's career. However, much as he loathed the man, could he do this? Deep down, he knew that, having this information, it was now his duty to do so, and immediately. He pulled into a lay-by on the A27 and switched the engine off. He picked up his phone, found Alison Vosper's mobile number in the address book, and dialed it. Expecting it to go to voicemail. So, voice is going. Expecting it to go to voicemail, he was both pleasantly surprised and somewhat nervous when she answered on the third ring. Roy! Nice to hear from you. So, have you changed your mind and decided to take my offer of the commander role in the Met? I presume that's why you're calling. Well, ma'am, not exactly. Though this is connected to your officer, albeit in a Alquate way. Alquate? Should we really be should we really be doing our heads in with words like Alquate on a Sunday evening? In all the time In all the time he'd known former ACC of Sussex, he'd found it hard to tell whether she was being nice, indeed humorous, or just plain sarcastic. I'll skip the quate and come straight to the point, ma'am. He summarised what Guy Bachelor had told him earlier, much of it seemingly confirmed by the notes in the red book. She was silent for a long time after he'd finished, that he began to wonder if he'd been cut off. Then, in a tone of her voice very different, serious and to the point, she said, Roy, how certain are you this former officer has told you the truth? 100%. He said it without hesitation. Even though he's serving time in prison, he's not looking to get anything out of this personally, ma'am. So why is he giving it to you? Because he hates corrupt coppers, even though he is one. Perhaps he doesn't see that, and he wanted to repay me for standing up for him at his trial. And he wanted to repay me for standing up for him at his trial with a character reference. Always loyal to your team, aren't you? It wasn't loyalty, ma'am. His appalling behaviour was out of character, and the court needed to hear that. That seemed to satisfy her. Okay, Roy. Don't discuss this with any of your colleagues in Sussex. Can you scan and send the contents of that notebook as soon as possible? I can do it when I get home. Half an hour. Good. What I'll do is place this in the hands of the Met Anti-Corruption Unit. She paused. Roy, I don't know. Roy, I don't need to tell you. This is a very delicate scenario. It needs to be handled both carefully and highly confidentially. Absolutely. I will also personally brief the Chief Constable of Sussex and the Police and Crimes Commissioner. They need to be made aware. I don't need you to do anything else at this stage. Understood, ma'am. End of the call. Roy sat for some minutes, feeling an almost overwhelming sense of calm. As if the monkey he had had on his as if the monkey that had been on his back for longer than he could remember had suddenly been prized away. He looked forward to getting home, and hopefully, with the rain some hours away, firing up the barbecue before it got too dark. And that is where we will leave it. Well, I hope you've enjoyed listening to the first 5 chapters of Peter James's Left You Dead. I may, in the future, read further chapters, maybe even the book. I don't know. Either way, I hope you've enjoyed listening and have a good day, afternoon, or evening. Thank you.